let's talk about Ukraine, shall we?
Yes, let's do it. Big stories out of Ukraine today.
Okay, well, who is shooting down who in and around the nuclear power plant in Ukraine? This is still unclear, but Ukrainian President Zelensky said that whoever shoots around this area will now become a target of Ukrainian intelligence and the Ukrainian army. Let's listen to him say it.
Окупанти намагаються надзвичайно цинічно залякувати людей, використовуючи Запорізьку атомну станцію. Вони фактично прикриваються станцією, щоб обстрілювати Нікополь і Марганець. Звичайно, на це має бути реакція потужна. Українські дипломати, представники держав-партнерів зроблять усе, щоб нові санкції проти Росії обов'язково блокували російську атомну галузь. І абсолютно всі посадовці держави-терориста, а також ті, хто їм допомагає у цій шантажистській операції з атомною станцією, мають відповідати міжнародному суді. Це обов'язково буде. А кожен російський військовий, який або стріляє по станції, або стріляє, прикриваючись цією станцією, повинен розуміти, що стає особливою мішенню для нашої розвідки, для наших спецслужб, для нашої...
Okay, so those are interesting words, right? Because he's saying that it is Russia shooting in and around this area, but if you shoot, we're going to start shooting at you, which is interesting, right? Because last week Russia showed video that indicated that the shelling was being done by Ukraine.
With both countries blaming each other for shelling in recent days. This video from a week ago claims to show the aftermath of a Ukrainian attack. We can't independently verify the footage, but it comes from the Russian occupiers who now control Enerhodar, where the Zaporozhye plant is located.
Okay, now over the weekend, Russia released these images of the shells that were dropped at the Zaporozhye plant. They are Brimstone missiles, which is a type of missile that was given to Ukraine by the United Kingdom. So now, of course, wait,
just let's put a pin in that a second.
Okay.
By the United Kingdom. So these are missiles that
come from the West.
That come from the West, NATO funded, British, of course, and arguably even more than, NATO's involvement or the US involvement. The UK has been, Boris Johnson himself flew there to talk them down from having a peace accord.
Yes, unabashedly so. The United Kingdom has been just as unabashed as the United States at how they support Ukraine with weapons and money and aid, right? And so, okay, this seems to be evidence of said weapons, right? Of course, naysayers could say, of course, Russia could have littered these about, and that is what the Western media perhaps would go with if they would even bother to pick up this story, right? Because these are images being released by Russia, and they are saying this is evidence that it is not us. Russia has continued to invite the investigative body, the IAEA, I don't have that acronym in front of me, saying, come and investigate then, right? And we'll get to their response in a second. But moments before the show today, we had this breaking news, which is that, go ahead.
Yes. So this just happened right before the show, which is that the Russian MiG chased a British spy plane out of the sky. So here it is. It was a Russian MiG-31 chases a British spy plane out after it violates Russian airspace, according to the Russian Ministry of Defense. The United Kingdom and its NATO allies fly aerial reconnaissance and strike mission exercises along Russia's northern, western, southern, and eastern air and maritime borders on a regular basis, with the Russian Air Force scrambling fighter jets whenever foreign jets, bombers, or unmanned aerial vehicles approach too close to Russian territory. A Royal Air Force surveillance and electronics warcraft violated Russian airspace in the Barents Sea, and they scrambled to intercept it, pushing it out of the area. So again, and by the way, these have been increasing. So what the hell is going on here? So British shells are and again, this is where Russia has said, we literally before the end of August want to have the International Atomic Energy Agency here. Do not wait until September.
Yes.
Get in here now. Russia is saying, get in here now, investigate what's being attacked at this nuclear power plant, and you're going to see where these shells are coming from. They're not coming from Russia, which has been alleged. And this is really what the Wall Street Journal is even saying. I love this Wall Street Journal headline.
Right. And in fact, Russia says that the European Union and Ukraine are undermining the investigative body from conducting this investigation because they're saying now is a good time. How about now? maybe now, like right now. And
What are they waiting for?
they don't seem to be coming. We're going to get to their response in a second. But the Western media seems to have made up its mind that it's Russia doing the attack. In fact, look at the headline on the Wall Street Journal today. Russia's goal in attack on nuclear plant is to take the energy, Ukraine says. So it's interesting, these two explanations that you get from reading the article. The explanation they give is that Russia wants to steal the power by severing its connection to Ukraine's remaining territory, according to Ukrainian leaders, international nuclear power experts, and the plant's staff. Okay, so they want to sever its connection to Ukraine's remaining territory, right? Again, Russia has controlled this plant since the springtime, or since the winter.
Since March, yeah.
And Ukrainian workers staff it. So then the next paragraph goes on to talk about how Russia, in fact, wants to reroute this power, not cut it off or blow it up or anything, or take it, but also that Russian technicians have openly discussed rerouting electricity to territories occupied by Russia and eventually back to Russia. Senior Russian officials, including Deputy Prime Minister Marat Kuznulin, have publicly pledged to integrate Zaporozhye with Russia's energy system or force Ukraine to pay for the electricity. So which is it? They want to destroy it so Ukrainians can't have it, or they want to steal it for themselves? Because both can't be true.
Well, as Scott Ritter said last week on our show, and in our interview with Scott, he said, no, they're very likely going to reroute the power so that it's not going into Ukraine, that it's going into Russia. That's going to likely happen.
Right, because that is more harmful, right? Whereas now Zelensky...
What do you mean more harmful? You mean harmful to...
To Ukraine, right? So like...
Well, yeah, but so the two arguments are that Russia is attacking its own nuclear power plant that it's guarding right now, which makes no sense and is laughable, right? But that's the argument, of course, still coming from the Western media and from Ukrainian authorities, right? Then the other side of it is that they're going to reroute the power and use it for themselves into Russia, into that eastern section of Ukraine. And absolutely the case, that's probably going to happen. So
right.
They can't, both things can't be true. Why would you destroy your own power plant?
Yes. And it's also interesting, Zelensky threatening to put sanctions on Russian nuclear energy. Now, if you go back a couple weeks ago, the report that we did on nuclear power showed that Russia is actually a global leader in nuclear power. They have more technology and more plants being built out than most countries in the world. And so how exactly is Zelensky going to sanction Russian nuclear energy inside of Russia when they already are a leader with his popularity, which does, I don't want to deny, Zelensky's popularity has proven to be a valuable currency.
But I think this, and by the way, his little like face to camera selfie video that he just produced I think we're starting to see more of these because they're losing the propaganda war. And now the Western media is starting to turn on them in a big way. We're seeing this in Newsweek. We saw this. We saw the Guardian piece. We're seeing other pieces now where he's having to step up these video releases and trying to get out in front of the message by him getting there with a camera and telling his side of the story
and talking in a threatening manner. He has not said things like that, like we're coming for you, that kind of, you are now enemy of the state. He's been mostly appealing to Western nations to defend them. This is really a different, I want to say, tone.
So again, the International Atomic Energy Agency, right? They have not been allowed in. Right, they have not been allowed in so far.
Well, it's interesting because the head of the International Atomic Energy Association, the IAEA, that's not an easy acronym. There are no consonants in it. It really bothers me. They said last week that their head had rescheduled a vacation in order to deal with this. But what did they do to deal with it? Well, on Friday, they released this statement saying, we've been in communication with Ukraine. They seem to be up and running for now. It doesn't seem to be a threat for now. It says the IAEA has not been able to visit this power plant since before the conflict began almost half a year ago. Since early March, it is controlled by Russian forces, but the Ukrainian staff are continuing to operate the plant. So, okay, but again, Russia continues to say, come in right now. Right now is a good time. Russia now is saying that the European Union and Ukraine are undermining this agency from conducting the investigation So, it doesn't seem like to be a very credible story because they're saying we're in communication with Ukraine. It seems to be okay for now. Like, don't you exist to validate those things?
Right.
Like, I also can have a Zoom call and hear them tell me it's okay, but I'm not an expert in that. So how about what your expertise is? You go in. I mean, I get this, like, well, maybe they're afraid because it's nuclear, but that's kind of their thing. Like, we can't give them that pass, right?
I mean, that's garbage. I mean, they would go into much worse areas, going into Iran or going into North Korea or going into other places. Like, don't give me that right now.
Sure.
On top of that, though, the reason you're not allowed to go in is because they would exactly see, as Scott Ritter said, where these shells came from. You would be able to, chart the azimuth of it. You'd be able to see exactly that it came from this direction, not that direction, just based on the line. You'd be able to see where these shells are coming from. And the fact that they're British shells landing there. Like,
yes.
Is Russia using British shells to shell their own controlled nuclear power plant, the largest nuclear power plant in all of Europe with 6 nuclear reactors? No, not likely. Meanwhile,
yes, and I mean, if you scan into those images, right? They're images. They're not written in Russian or Ukrainian. It's English. I don't know if that So, meanwhile, people are fleeing this region, with good cause. But where are they fleeing to? Many, according to TASS, are fleeing to Russia. The Russian government saying they have issued over 30,000 passports to people who are applying for Russian passports in this region who want to get out of there. So that's interesting. Also worth noting. Worth noting. I didn't even know the brain could switch those words, but it did, that the Ukrainian parliament just today approved a big budget increase to its military spending. Parliament authorized an additional $7.3 billion to be spent in military activity through domestic borrowing. I'm interested in what this means because who inside of Ukraine is lending to the army? Like domestic, huh? Because I mean, we know that the United States is willing to, and other Western nations.
There's plenty of oligarchs inside of Ukraine who are multimillionaires, billionaires, right? Mm-hmm. Who have made a lot of money off of Western money flowing into that country over the past 8 years. We know that. We've documented that here on the show. Driving Lamborghinis.
Well, we know that the West is offering all of this lend-lease weaponry. Right. And all of this aid in loans, right? So it's not, but this specific budget increase is not through foreign loans. It's domestic.
Dust G in our chat says, Ukraine is a Wall Street hedge fund for weapon and tax dollar laundering. Yes. That should be their motto. Okay. Come to Ukraine, where we will launder your money. I mean, it is the most corrupt country in Europe, right? One of the most corrupt countries in Europe. I think it held the lead as the most corrupt. So when money and all of the stuff flows into this country, where does it go? It just gets laundered.
And the banking specifically is high on the corruption scale in terms of international investors, or it wasn't known for that before this war.
Right.